The sovereign principality was not a small empire. It was a nightmare carved into the stars. For 6,000 years, they had ruled through fear. Their armada could destroy entire planets, turn suns into silent ashes, and freeze solar systems into endless dark winters. And every species that faced them did the same thing. They begged. They surrendered. They disappeared. So when their leader, Grand Duke Alaric, stepped into the massive diplomatic amphitheater of the Geneva orbital station, he expected the same outcome. He expected fear. He expected silence. He expected humanity to break. Instead, Ambassador Theodore Sterling adjusted his cuffs. He glanced at his luxury wristwatch, then leaned toward the microphone. "Just a quick question, Your Grace," Theodore said calmly. His voice echoed across the silent hall. "Does this war start now, or after lunch?" A pause. Then he added casually, "Because they're serving beef Wellington at noon, and I'd hate for it to get cold." The entire chamber froze. Hundreds of alien delegates sat in stunned silence. This was supposed to be a formal declaration of extinction, a moment where humanity should be terrified. But the human ambassador looked like a man annoyed by a delayed meeting, not a man facing genocide. Above them, the Geneva orbital station slowly rotated in space, a massive ring of titanium, glass, and artificial gardens. It was neutral ground, a place where civilizations met, negotiated, and sometimes died. Officially, unofficially, it was where the galaxy came to watch humanity be judged. In a secured room deep inside the station, Theodore Sterling sat at the head of a long table. He looked relaxed, controlled, almost bored. Beside him stood Eleanor Harding, his chief of staff. Sharp mind. Every second counted. She scanned a glowing data pad. "They've locked the concourse," she said. 30 elite guards, 12 intelligent scribes, psychological warfare unit disguised as diplomats. Theodore took a sip of black coffee. "So, standard theater," he said. A hologram flickered on the table. A man appeared. Richard Gallagher, CEO of a major interstellar defense contractor. Behind him, orbital shipyards burned softly in the background like distant suns. "The sovereign fleet is in position," Gallagher said. 10,000 ships, hidden near Alpha Centauri jump gate. "They think we don't see them." Theodore didn't look impressed. "Do we own the timing?" he asked. Gallagher smiled slightly. "Oh, we own everything." He paused. "Their economy too." Eleanor tapped her screen. BlackRock Orbital and JP Morgan Stellar have completed positioning. The moment war is declared, their imperial credit collapses. 40% drop within hours. Theodore nodded slowly. "So when they fire their weapons, they also fire their economy," Eleanor finished. This was the secret no alien empire understood. Humanity did not fight wars like other species. They didn't just build weapons. They built systems, markets, contracts, debt structures, and traps that could destroy an empire without firing a single shot. Eleanor continued. 80,000 stealth micromines are already deployed along their jump routes. Thermonuclear payloads, dormant, undetectable, waiting for signal activation. Theodore leaned back. "And they'll only trigger when they officially declare war." He nodded once. "Good." A pause. Then he added, "Legal warfare is always cleaner." General Gallagher's voice came back through the hologram. "One problem. Timing is critical. Their fleet must remain in formation until exactly 1 p.m. hours. If they move early, the trap fails." Theodore checked his watch again.
9:45 a.m.
He smiled slightly. "Then I'll keep them busy." Eleanor looked at him carefully. "If you're wrong by even 5 minutes, North America becomes glass." Theodore stood up. "I'm aware." He adjusted his suit jacket, then added casually, "But they're going to declare war anyway." He paused. "They always do." The doors to the diplomatic hall opened. A wave of silence hit them instantly. Inside, thousands of alien representatives waited. At the center stood Grand Duke Alaric, towering, armored, furious, a living symbol of conquest. And he was smiling, because he thought this moment already belonged to him. "You are all witnesses," Alaric declared. His voice shook the hall. "For 2 decades, humanity has insulted the sovereign principality. You have broken treaties, armed rebels, corrupted trade." He pointed directly at Theodore. "And now, you will be erased." A holographic display appeared above them. 10,000 warships, surrounding Earth. A perfect execution formation. A death net closing in. Alaric raised his hand. "One order," he said. "And your species ends." The hall went silent. Even alien diplomats stopped breathing, waiting for the final word. But Theodore Sterling didn't react. He simply picked up a pen and wrote something calmly on paper, then placed it down. He looked up. "Before you do that," Theodore said politely, "I have one question." Alaric narrowed his eyes. "What?" Theodore checked his watch, then smiled. "Does your war include lunch breaks?" The hall did not understand what they were hearing. Was this a joke? A delay tactic? Or madness? But somewhere deep inside the system, a countdown had already begun. And humanity was not preparing for war. They were preparing for a financial execution. For a moment, nobody moved. The question hung in the air like a glitch in reality. "Does your war include lunch breaks?" Grand Duke Alaric blinked slowly. Once. Twice. Then his jaw tightened. This was not how declarations of extinction were supposed to go. Humans were supposed to panic, to beg, to collapse under the weight of inevitability, not negotiate dining schedules. A low murmur spread across the Grand Assembly Hall. Alien diplomats shifted in their seats. Whispers translated into dozens of languages. Something felt wrong. Not strategically wrong. Psychologically wrong. Alaric stepped forward. His armored boots echoed like judgment on stone. "You think this is entertainment?" he hissed. "You think your primitive humor changes anything?" He raised his hand again. Behind him, the hologram of the sovereign fleet burned brighter. 10,000 warships. Locked on Earth. Ready. Waiting. "The only thing separating your species from extinction," Alaric continued, "is my patience. And I am running out of it." Theodore Sterling finally moved. Slowly. He placed his pen down, then adjusted his cuffs again, like a man preparing for a mild inconvenience. Not annihilation. "I understand," Theodore said calmly. "Extinction is very time-sensitive. I respect that." A pause. Then he added, "But so is lunch." A ripple of confusion passed through the hall. One alien delegate actually checked its translator device, convinced it was broken. Eleanor Harding stood quietly behind Theodore. Her datapad flickered with live systems. Numbers. Signals. Countdowns. Everything was in motion. Just invisible to everyone in the room. Except her. In orbit, far above the station. Human systems were waking up. Silently. 80,000 dormant signatures spread across Alpha Centauri space like dust. Not weapons that announce themselves. Not ships. Not fleets. Something worse. Patience. Back in the hall, Alaric narrowed his eyes. "You are stalling." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Theodore tilted his head slightly. "Stalling," he repeated. "No, Your Grace." He smiled faintly. "I am scheduling." That word landed strangely. Scheduling. Not resisting. Not surrendering. Not negotiating. Scheduling. Alaric slammed his gauntlet into the podium. The sound cracked through the chamber. "Enough. Prepare your final words, human. My fleet is already in position." The hologram above them shifted again. The fleet tightened its formation. Closer. Tighter. Like a noose. Eleanor leaned slightly toward Theodore. "Movement confirmed," she whispered. "They've locked formation near the gas giant. Slip space drives are hot." Theodore didn't look at her. "Good," he said softly. "Exactly where we want them." Alaric raised both arms. "This is your final moment. Bow. Beg. Or burn. The entire hall held its breath. Even alien news drones stabilized mid-air. Recording. Waiting. History was seconds away from being written. And then, Theodore looked at his watch.
9:55 a.m.
He exhaled slowly. Actually, he said, I think we take a short recess. Silence. A what? Alaric said slowly. Theodore turned slightly, addressing the entire assembly. A recess. He spoke like it was the most normal thing in the universe. War is a formal process. You've already issued your declaration. So we follow procedure. He stepped forward, hands behind his back, completely relaxed. As per United Earth Directorate Diplomatic Statute, he continued, all hostile declarations require a mandatory cooling period before execution. A pause. Think of it as legal courtesy. The hall erupted in confused noise. Cooling period. Legal courtesy. For war. Alaric's voice dropped dangerously. You are mocking me. Theodore shook his head.
No.
I'm regulating you. That line made something shift in the room. Even the most arrogant alien delegates went quiet. Regulating. Not resisting. Not fearing. Managing. Eleanor tapped her screen once. A private channel opened. Gallagher's voice came through instantly. They're locked in position, he said. One deviation early and the entire mind field destabilizes. Theodore nodded slightly. Understood. Then he spoke into the MIC again. Let's reconvene at 1 p.m. hours. So everyone can be properly prepared. Alaric stared at him. You think I will wait? Theodore gave a small shrug. I think you already are. That sentence landed like a blade. For the first time, Alaric hesitated, because he realized something uncomfortable. The humans weren't reacting. They were directing. Not defending. Not surviving. Designing the flow of the entire encounter. And that terrified him more than any weapon ever could. Theodore turned slightly toward the exit. Enjoy the break, Your Grace. Then he paused. Oh, and please don't start the war early. He smiled faintly. It would really ruin lunch. He walked out. Just like that.
No guards.
No fear.
No urgency.
Behind him, the Grand Assembly Hall erupted in chaos. Alien diplomats arguing. Military aides recalculating. Psychological units failing to process human behavior. Alaric stood frozen, watching the empty doorway. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Not on the battlefield. Not in sensors. In timing. And for the first time in 6,000 years of conquest, the sovereign principality did not feel in control of the clock. Somewhere in orbit, something that had been sleeping for weeks was starting to listen. And Earth was quietly waiting for 1 p.m. The hallway outside the Grand Assembly Hall was silent. Too silent. Even the hum of the Geneva orbital station felt distant, like the station itself was holding its breath. Ambassador Theodore Sterling walked with steady steps.
No rush.
No fear. Just timing. Beside him, Eleanor Harding kept pace, her datapad glowing with live battlefield feeds no one else could see. Status? Theodore asked calmly. Eleanor didn't look up. They're still locked in formation near Alpha Centauri. 10,000 ships. Engines hot. Slip space drive synchronized. A pause. Exactly where we want them. Theodore nodded. Good. Then, casually, any emotional instability? Eleanor almost smirked. In their fleet? Not yet. In their economy? Yes. She turned the screen slightly. A live galactic market index was collapsing in real time. Red lines everywhere. Currencies falling. Trade routes freezing. Credit systems panicking. The moment they declared intent, she said, markets started pricing in extinction risk. And extinction is expensive. Theodore adjusted his cuffs. Everything is expensive, he said, until someone else is paying for it. Far away, in deep space near Alpha Centauri, the Sovereign Principality Armada floated like a god-made wall. 10,000 warships. Millions of soldiers. Hundreds of command minds. A perfect war machine. Waiting for one word. Fire. Inside the flagship Imperius, Grand Duke Alaric stood rigid. He was no longer confident. He was irritated. The humans hadn't broken. They hadn't begged. They hadn't even panicked. They had gone to lunch. That detail kept replaying in his mind. Lunch. As if extinction was a scheduling issue. Still no change in human response, he demanded. A tactical officer hesitated. No, Your Grace. They left the chamber. Left. Alaric snapped. Yes. They said something about a recess. Silence. Then anger. You see. Alaric growled. Cowardice disguised as procedure. But even as he said it, something felt off. Because the human fleet was nowhere to be seen.
No defensive formations. No scrambling signals. No panic transmissions.
Just silence. Controlled silence. Back on Geneva orbital. Eleanor spoke quietly. They're starting to notice the absence of resistance. Theodore nodded. Good. Let them sit with it. A pause. Then Eleanor added. The minds are still dormant. But their AI is awake now. Theodore stopped walking. Awake how? Eleanor finally looked up. It's listening for the declaration trigger. Theodore exhaled slowly. So the moment they confirm war. It becomes physics, she said. He resumed walking. Perfect. Inside the sovereign fleet. Confusion was spreading. Not fear yet. Not panic. Something more dangerous. Doubt. Why haven't they deployed defenses? A junior commander asked. They must know we are here. Unless, another officer hesitated. Unless what? Unless they don't plan to defend. Silence. That idea was unacceptable. On the bridge of the Imperius, Alaric suddenly turned sharply. Reconfirm human military positions. A pause. Then. There are none, Your Grace. Alaric froze. That is impossible. They must have hidden fleets. We've scanned everything. Scan again. And so they did. Again. And again. And again. Nothing.
No armadas. No defensive shield grids. No muebles action.
Just Earth. Quiet. Still. Waiting. And for the first time, the sovereign principality faced a terrifying possibility. What if the humans weren't unprepared? What if they were simply unconcerned? Back on Geneva orbital, Theodore entered a secure tactical suite. A massive holographic table lit up instantly. Alpha Centauri system. Zoomed in. Frozen. Perfectly staged. General Harrison was already there. Sir, he said. They're getting nervous. Theodore nodded. Good. Fear makes timing predictable. Harrison pointed at the display. They're holding formation tighter than expected. If they break early. They won't, Theodore interrupted. They are too disciplined. A pause. Then softer. And too proud. Eleanor spoke. Markets confirm liquidity freeze in 3 major sovereign sectors. They're running out of economic oxygen. Theodore smiled faintly. So are they about to move? Eleanor checked. Yes. Then. Countdown has begun in their command chain. Theodore looked at the clock.
10:40 a.m.
Still early. Too early. Tell Gallagher, he said. Keep minds at full sleep cycle.
No premature activation.
Harrison nodded. And the fleet jump groups. Theodore's expression sharpened slightly. They stay ready. A pause. Because when this starts, it ends fast. Back in deep space, Alaric finally made a decision. Prepare jump sequence. A tactical officer hesitated. Your Grace, standard protocol requires confirmation of planetary defenses before mass jump deployment. Alaric slammed his fist. There are no defenses. They are afraid. They are stalling. But even as he shouted it, his voice didn't sound certain anymore, because stalling implied control. And control implied intelligence. And intelligence implied something worse. Planning. The Imperious bridge fell silent. Then, a single warning tone sounded. Not from enemies. From internal systems. A market alert. What is that? Alaric snapped. The officer read the feed. Imperial credit volatility spike. Derivative markets collapsing. Someone is shorting the Empire. Alaric turned slowly. What does that mean? The officer hesitated. It means, someone is betting we will not survive the next hour. Silence. Heavy. Unnatural. Back on Geneva orbital. Theodore took a seat. Eleanor. Yes. How long until 1 p.m.? She checked. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Theodore leaned back. Perfect. A pause. Then he said softly, let them think they're hunting us. They're not. Eleanor looked at him. What are they then? Theodore smiled slightly. Assets. In deep space, 10,000 warships began running final pre-jump calculations. And for the first time, a warning appeared across every sovereign command screen. Unidentified economic hostile activity density deep space near Alpha Centauri was never truly dark. Radiation from the nearby gas giant painted everything in faint, violent colors, greens, blues, and unstable reds bending through the void like broken light. The Sovereign Principality Armada floated inside it. 10,000 warships. Perfect formation. Absolute confidence. And absolute ignorance. Inside the flagship Imperious, tension had finally replaced arrogance. Not fear yet. But something close. Impatience. Jump sequence status. Grand Duke Alaric demanded. A tactical officer responded instantly. Final synchronization complete, Your Grace. All fleets are locked. Slip space anchors stable. A pause. Awaiting command authorization. Alaric stared at the display. Earth. Quiet. Still not reacting. That silence was starting to feel wrong. On a military level, silence meant weakness. But on a strategic level, it sometimes meant preparation. Any change in human activity? He asked. Another officer checked. No fleets detected.
No defensive mobilization. No transmissions.
Just nothing. Alaric scoffed. Then they have accepted inevitability. He straightened. Begin final countdown. Across the fleet, commands echoed. Millions of soldiers braced. Engines synchronized. Weapons systems primed. History was about to be rewritten. And somewhere far away, humanity was watching the clock.
Horloge Geneva Orbital Station Tactical Suite.
Theodore Sterling stood in front of the holographic table. Alpha Centauri glowed in the center. A cluster of 10,000 red icons marked the Sovereign Armada. Locked. Waiting. Alive. General Harrison spoke quietly. They've started final countdown. Theodore didn't move. Good. Eleanor Harding's fingers hovered over her data pad. All systems are green. Markets are fully positioned. Legal clearance is locked. A pause. And minds are still dormant. Theodore nodded. Perfect. Then softly, let them finish the speech. Harrison frowned slightly. Sir, we could trigger early. Theodore shook his head.
No.
If they die early, they die confused. A pause. I want them to understand. Eleanor looked at him. Understand what? Theodore finally turned. That they were never the ones holding the weapon. Milky Way Alpha Centauri, Sovereign Armada. 10 seconds to jump, the officer announced. Alaric lifted his head. His final moment of pride returned. Finally. Action. 5. 4. 3. Every ship in the fleet aligned. Slip space engines flared. Reality itself began to bend. 2. On my mark. And then, something happened. Not an explosion. Not an attack. Not even a signal. A shift. Across the entire formation. Every sovereign warship received the same silent update. Not from command. Not from enemies. From infrastructure. A system message flashed across every bridge screen. Terms of service violation detected. Asset control transfer initiated. What is this? Alaric roared. Override it. Shut it down. But it was too late. Because the fleet wasn't just a fleet anymore. It was a system. And systems have owners. Skull the trap activates. Far inside the gas giant shadow. 80,000 dormant signatures blinked awake. Not missiles. Not ships. Something far more precise. Perfectly placed microstructures. Waiting for exactly this moment. Eleanor whispered. Trigger condition met. Theodore replied calmly. Execute.
Symbole de collision Alpha Centauri instant collapse zone.
The first mine didn't explode. It activated physics. A ripple of controlled annihilation spread outward. Then another. Then thousands. At the exact moment the Sovereign Fleet's slip space engines fully engaged. The mines synchronized. Not against ships. Against their engines. Every warp core in the fleet entered transition simultaneously. And then. Space broke. Not visually at first. Not dramatically. But structurally. Slip space engines rely on contained micro-singularities. The mines disrupted containment fields at the exact nanosecond of maximum instability. The result? 10,000 artificial singularities collapsed at once. The universe reacted instantly. Ships didn't explode. They unraveled. Matter stretched into impossible threads. Gravity inverted. Space folded inwards like tearing fabric. Entire warships were pulled into collapsing geometry they could not perceive. And then, silence. No debris field.
No requis. No distress signals.
Just empty space where an armada had existed seconds before.
Tableau avec tendance descendante Geneva orbital tactical suite.
The holographic display flickered violently. 10,000 red icons. Gone. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Deleted. A systems officer whispered. Contact lost. Another followed. All carrier waves. Gone. A third voice cracked. There is nothing left. Eleanor didn't blink. She only spoke. Market reaction. The hologram shifted instantly. Galactic exchange data. A red vertical collapse. Currencies free-falling. Empire-backed securities evaporating. Imperial credit is in freefall, she said. Automatic liquidation triggers are activating across 37 systems. General Harrison muttered.
Jesus.
Theodore finally exhaled. Good. He checked his watch. 12:20 p.m. Still time. Phase 2 is already starting, Eleanor said. Without a fleet, their empire is financially exposed. Theodore nodded. Then we proceed. He turned slightly. Let's go get lunch. In deep space. Something ancient and arrogant had just been erased without a single shot fired from a ship. And on Earth. The people responsible were choosing wine pairing. The silence after Alpha Centauri wasn't normal silence. It was the kind of silence that follows something the universe doesn't know how to explain.
No debris.
No distress calls.
No retreat signals.
Just absence. A 10,000 ship armada had stopped existing like it had been erased from a ledger. Theodore Sterling sat down again. Calm. Composed. Like a man reviewing quarterly reports instead of ending a war. Eleanor's screen was already updating. Numbers were collapsing across the galactic financial grid. Confirmed status, Theodore said. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Fleet neutralized. 0 remaining sovereign capital ships in operational range. A pause. And their command structure is panicking. General Harrison exhaled slowly. That was not a battle. Theodore nodded.
No.
That was liquidity adjustment. Eleanor zoomed out the hologram. Entire sectors of the galaxy were flashing red. Markets reacting faster than governments. Economies collapsing before news of the battle even spread. The moment their fleet vanished, she said. Their empire lost collateral backing. And without collateral. She looked up. Their entire system defaults. Theodore leaned back. That's the problem with empires built on force. They forget force is expensive. Inside the imperious bridge, no alarms were ringing anymore, because systems were already shutting down, one by one, as if something had taken ownership of them. Grand Duke Alaric stood frozen, still alive, still breathing, but no longer in command of anything, not even information. "Report," he shouted. No response. "Report." Only static. A tactical officer finally whispered, "There is nothing to report, Your Grace. The fleet is gone." Alaric staggered backward. "No. That is impossible. We are the sovereign principality. We do not disappear." But the hologram in front of him told a different story. Empty space.
No signatures.
No mass. No energy. Just absence. And then, a new message appeared on every remaining terminal. Not military. Not tactical. Corporate. Asset liquidation complete. All military holdings reassigned. Current owner, United Earth Directorate. Alaric stared at it. Slowly. Like his brain refused to translate it. "What is this?" A voice came through the bridge speakers. Calm. Professional. Human. "Good afternoon, Your Grace." It was Theodore. Theodore's voice echoed through the comm channel. "We've completed the initial restructuring phase. Your fleet has been repossessed." A pause. "And resold." Alaric's claws tightened. "Resold." Eleanor stepped in. General Dynamics Exo Division now owns salvage rights. BlackRock Orbital holds infrastructure claims. JP Morgan Stellar has acquired your debt instruments. Theodore added casually, "And we've already issued bonds backed by your remaining territories." Silence. Heavy. Broken. Alaric whispered, "You turned war into finance." Theodore smiled slightly. "No. We turned your war into our balance sheet." Days later, the capital world of the sovereign principality was no longer ruled by warlords, or emperors, or generals. It was ruled by auditors. The imperial throne room, once a place of fear and conquest, had been converted into a corporate restructuring office. Holographic spreadsheets floated above ancient marble floors. War banners replaced by acquisition charts. Emperor Malachor sat on his obsidian throne. But he was no longer emperor. Just a client. A human analyst adjusted his tablet. "Sir," he said politely, "we are going to need access to your remaining offshore accounts." Malachor's voice trembled. "You destroyed my empire." The analyst didn't look up. "No. You defaulted on it." Theodore stood at the Grand Assembly Hall again. But the atmosphere was different now. No fear.
No tensión.
Only submission. Alien delegates sat in organized rows. Not as conquerors. Not as equals. As shareholders. A massive hologram displayed the new galactic economy. Unified. Centralized. Optimized. Profitable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Theodore said calmly, "welcome to the United Earth Galactic Trade Coalition." A nervous silence. Then whispering. Then acceptance. Because they all knew the truth now. There was no resistance left. Not after what happened to the sovereign principality. An alien delegate raised a hand. Ambassador Sterling. Was any of this necessary? Theodore paused. He thought for a moment. Then replied, "No." A pause. Then he added, "But it was efficient." As the meeting ended, Theodore walked alone toward the exit. Eleanor followed behind. "You ever feel bad about it?" she asked quietly. Theodore adjusted his cuffs. "No." A pause. "We didn't destroy them. We restructured them." Eleanor frowned. "That's worse." Theodore smiled faintly. "No. That's just capitalism." The doors closed behind them. And somewhere in the galaxy, every former warlord, emperor, and admiral was learning the same lesson. They had not been defeated by weapons. They had been defeated by paperwork, by contracts, by timing, by systems they never understood. Because in the end, the universe didn't belong to the strongest army, or the oldest empire, or the deadliest fleet. It belonged to the ones who controlled the ledger.